I have a walnut bowl that I turned down 2 or 3 years ago, and it's dried, and I think the center of the tree went through the bowl, so it is cracked on either side, which made it fairly straightforward to cut out those two opposing sides. So I've made a jig for the bandsaw that I can hold the bowl in place and get a very straight cut through the bowl. And it's also much, much safer than trying to do it without any kind of jig, as the bowl is round and it would just roll under the force of the blade.
Daddy, why did you cut this apart?
So I can glue it back together again. At this point, I need to remake this piece because it's cracked. So, and I think it's about 2 inches wide. It is 2 1/4 or so. So I need a thick piece of wood, and then I need to decide what I'm going to make this out of and what kind of pattern I'm going to do. So the thought that I've had is to build a 2-inch wide striped piece and to make it out of a bunch of thin pieces running horizontal on the bowl. I have this nice piece of birch that I think may just work. I'll cut this piece of birch on the bandsaw because it's warped, and doing this on the table saw would be a little dangerous. So this is a lot safer. And I'll do the rough cutting on the bandsaw. And then we'll joint and plane the piece of wood to get it ready for the table saw, so it's nice and flat and square. At the table saw, we'll cut it into strips to start making the segmented pieces. I figured out that I need a 6-degree angle to get the right radius in the ring that I'm going to make. So now I'm cutting all these strips with a 6-degree angle on one side. Now I'm going to alternate between birch and walnut with the strips. Then I cut the strips to 2-inch lengths on the radial arm saw. And they need to be fairly accurately 2 inches, but I'm going to sand the faces once I'm done, so it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be close enough that it doesn't take too long to sand those faces smooth. And it's usually a good idea to make some extra pieces, because it's much better to have too many than to not quite have enough and have to go all the way back through the process again of making a few more pieces that are close enough to the ones you've already made. So lots and lots of pieces. And with a little luck, my radius actually worked out just about right. It's just about the right size. And I sand each one of them just a little bit. Now my ring isn't a complete circle, so if I'm going to clamp it together when I glue it, I need to finish the circle of the ring. So I'm making a solid piece of wood that needs to fit into what I have with the right angles. To complete that circle. And you can see the circle now and how that works. So here I'm dry fitting. Now I'm adding glue and clamping it up. And we wait overnight. And have a little party. And the next day I can sand all the faces that are going to be glued together to make the final form. Now the thought occurred that maybe I should add a white strip on each side of the stripes, kind of give it a little more form and give it a little bit of an edge between the dark walnut of the bowl and the pattern of the stripes. So I'm making a little bit less than a 1/4 inch wide strip to glue in on each side of the striped pattern. You can see here how that's going to fit with the stripes. And then very carefully sanding each one of those just a little bit. And now some glue and a lot of clamps. The one issue with this is I really wasn't able to get pressure against each joint between these pieces. There's a little bit more of a gap between each of these pieces than I would have liked, but and then we sand that surface to get ready to be glued to the two sides of the bowl. I did realize I need to get the top flush, so I had to cut off a little bit of the angle on the striped piece. And then we'll clamp everything together. I use some big clamps on the bottom of the bowl and a band clamp around the top lip of the bowl. And then we'll just clamp it all together and wait for it to dry. I ended up letting this sit for about 2 days, but I didn't really have to. And now we're ready to turn it. So I'll sort of attach a faceplate to the bottom. I'm missing a little bit where I cut out the part from the bowl. Now I'm carefully turning the bowl down and getting to the final shape. Here I'm making the tenon for the chuck to hold the bowl on the lathe. Really all that needs to be perfect here is the sides of the tenon and the outer edge of the tenon, because that's what's going to actually touch the chuck. Now we can do the bulk of the work on the bowl. And again, I used the bowl gouge to remove most of the material and then a scraper to get the surface smooth. And on this there was a little bit of an issue between the birch and the walnut, and the birch kept wanting to chip and leaving little holes, so I had to really sharpen the scraper. And be very careful to get the surface to a smooth enough state. Now the form is done, so I'll do a little sanding. Actually a lot of sanding. I won't show too much of that. Now a little bit of finish. I'm using my linseed oil and beeswax mix. I will put it on heavy at first, and then I'll come back in about an hour and wipe it down. There were a few defects in the walnut that showed up in the final turning, but overall it came out pretty nice. Thanks for watching.